is reasonable to live here in Italy? This is a question that I recently received via my Instagram DMs, and I have to be honest with you, it's so nuanced that I decided to record this video today, because if you're serious about moving to Italy, I'm pretty certain this question would have crossed your mind as well. And so I hope this video can give you some food for thought as to where might be best for you here in Italy. Now, we've got to begin with the foundation. You need to define what reasonable means for you, because it's such a subjective term. What's reasonable for one person can be really, really expensive for another. So you've got to really begin here. What is the monthly amount of money that you can afford to spend on your housing and on your everyday costs, shall we say? That is going to be your foundation. And from there, it will help to give you a better indication of where in Italy might be best for your budget. Secondly, we've got to look at your lifestyle. And this really divides into two different camps: housing and local services and amenities. So if we're going to start with housing, there's a few things to consider here. Firstly, whether you're going to be renting or buying a property here in Italy, both of which come with pros and cons. I would say, and this is an honest piece of advice, I don't personally recommend that anybody moves to Italy and immediately buys somewhere. I think you've got to experience life in this country with a little less obligation before you actually decide to purchase a home. I don't think Italy is the country for everyone. As controversial a statement as that may be, I think that Italy works for some people and it doesn't work for others. And if you've gone through the whole legalities of purchasing a home here, and all the expense and everything else that goes into that, only to discover that it's not really the country for you, it's a little bit of a problem. So I think it's better to come here, no strings attached, be a little bit more free, rent somewhere, and only have that as your obligation here until you're really, really certain that this is a place that you want to live on a long-term basis. That's my personal opinion, of course. However, I will say to you that, of course, whether you rent or you buy, there are costs that you have to factor in. With rent, especially, if you don't have any existing connections here in Italy, getting a landlord to trust you is no easy feat. Let me tell you, we struggled, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, with gaining the trust of landlords moving back to the Salerno province, because we moved to a part of the province that we didn't have any existing connections in. And so I know firsthand that even if you've lived in the country for a number of years, even if your partner is also Italian, it can be really, really difficult to gain the trust of landlords, because unfortunately some landlords have had pretty terrible experiences with tenants not paying the rent or damaging properties, etc. So this is why I say to you, it pays to build connections as soon as you possibly can. As soon as you know that you're really serious about this move, start networking, start, building those connections online as much as you can. And if you're interested in signing up to the waitlist for my expat community, which is now launching in January 2026, then I'll put the link below in the show notes and also up here as well. But essentially, you need to be building those connections in order to give yourself a smoother ride when you actually start looking for homes here in Italy. But what you may discover is that landlords require quite a hefty deposit from you to give them peace of mind. This could be anything up to 6 months. Some landlords might require more, and they might even require you to obtain a bank guarantee, which basically means that the bank has to lock onto a sum of money for the duration of your rental agreement, as a way to pay any late payments or defaults that may occur during your tenancy. It's something. So you've got to consider this. Renting is not as easy as it may seem, particularly when it comes to the amount of money you've got to lay out up front before you even move. Buying, on the other hand, you've got other expenses to consider. So you've got all your kind of rental fees, estate agency fees if you've gone for an agent, translation services, because I do recommend that you do this if you're not good at Italian. And of course, any taxes and other things that you have to pay. Now, I will tell you, I've never purchased a home here yet, so I can't really give you much more than that for now, but I do intend to bring somebody into the expat community who can give you some more detailed information. So if you are really serious about living in Italy, I do suggest getting your name on the wait list, because I promise you it's a community that's really going to support you and help you to thrive in your new life here in Italy. But they are two main considerations, whether you're going to rent or whether you're going to buy here. Now, I will say to you, that regardless of whether you rent or buy, you mustn't forget your condominium costs if you plan to live in a shared building with other people. So an apartment block or something similar usually has condominium costs that come in addition to any rent or mortgage payments that you have to make. Now, how frequently they take this money from you depends really on the administration of the building. Sometimes it's every month, sometimes it's every year, sometimes it's every quarter. It really, really depends. And the cost varies as well. So some buildings you might pay only a minimal amount, like 30 euros extra per month, but other buildings it can be upwards of 100 euros a month. It depends if you have a portiera or caretaker that manages the building. If you have a portiera, generally your condominium costs are going to be top end because you're also paying the salary of that portiera as well. So you've got to consider this. This is not something that is written in black and white. When you initially decide to rent somewhere, you've got to factor this in as an additional cost. And also when you buy somewhere, it's not like your mortgage payments and that's it. This will be an extra sum of money that you'll need to pay on top. Now let's talk as well about like the age of the buildings. There are a lot of older buildings here in Italy, but with older buildings, as charming and romantic as they may look, come with them a whole heap of hidden problems. A lot of older buildings here in Italy suffer from damp and mold. And trust me, I know because I have experienced it myself. I know people who have had such a problem. So it's quite common here. So you must consider this because especially if you're buying somewhere, those kinds of problems are costly to resolve if they can be resolved at all. Also, kind of like the heating supply to your home as well. There are so many factors like the piping, the plumbing, like especially if you're buying somewhere, these things, if you don't get them right at the beginning, if you don't understand the condition of them properly, of course you'll have surveys done, you should know this, but if there are any things that you didn't kind of uncover at that point, can prove really, really costly later on. So you must consider this. The quality of your home is fundamental. I would say to you as well that even if you're renting, do consider the quality of your home because when you rent here in Italy, you often rent a shell. Kitchens and most appliances, apart from bathroom suites, usually are taken with the tenant every time that they move. So, that's an extra expense that you're going to have to purchase a kitchen when you move into a home as well. So factor this in. Factor in the age of the building. This is going to be really important as well in the winter for insulation. What are the windows like? Like super simple consideration, but really, really important. Double glazing. If you can get a property of double glazing, snap it up because I promise you the winters here can get quite chilly depending on where in the country you are. And so you want to be able to insulate your home and not have like the wind blowing through the windows like they did for us in Palermo. So let's talk about location. This is obviously the next piece of the puzzle that is going to determine where it's reasonable for you to live here in Italy. If you want to live slap bang in the middle of a city centre with excellent transport links, or you want to live in the posher, nicer parts of Italy, you can certainly expect to pay a lot more than if you choose to live in a suburb location or you choose to live a little bit more off the beaten track. So there's lots to consider here, and I want to give you a real life example, taking Palermo into consideration, the city that I lived in for 2.5 years. I'm going to show you two different quartieres, two different neighbourhoods, one central, one a little bit more as a suburb, and you can see the difference in price. So let's take a little look. Okay, so let's begin with properties for sale. Now I've selected Politiama and Liberta Bassa, which are two very nice quartieres or neighbourhoods in Palermo. Very central, a lot of really nice designer shops and boutiques in this area. It's one of the nicer ends of Palermo, absolutely. And you can see that this is reflected in the price. So we've got some top end prices for quite large homes, admittedly, in this area. Then you have some slightly lower prices. But generally speaking, the cost of homes in this part of Palermo is always going to be more top end because of the location. So this proves to you that the more central you are in a city or the nicer parts will, of course, naturally be more expensive to buy homes in. Okay, the second quartiera or neighborhood that I've selected in Palermo is Ziza. Now, this is a little bit more out of the center. You can still feasibly walk there, depending on where in Ziza you are. It's around a 25-30 minute walk, really depending on where exactly you are. So it's a little bit outside of the main center itself, still with good transport links, etc., but it's not right in the middle. And really, depending on where you are in Ziza, some parts are nicer, some parts are a little bit more rough around the edges. And you can see that the prices are somewhat different to what I've just shown you. So you can understand alone, just from taking Palermo as an example for purchasing homes, that firstly, the cost of houses generally is less in Sicily compared to other parts of Italy, absolutely. But also that even depending on where you are in Palermo, if you choose to go a little bit out of the main centre, you definitely get more for your money in that sense. Now, when it comes to rental properties, using both areas as the same example in Palermo, you can see it's a similar story to purchasing properties. Now, don't get misled. You might think €400 a month is good, but look at the size of the property, 20 meters squared, and also consider it's a short-term rental. This is something else that you need to factor in. The really high, excessively high rents compared to the size of the home are usually this. They're usually short-term rentals. But if you scroll down, you can see that if you're looking for a longer term rental, the prices average really anything from, I would say, €700 a month upwards of over €1,000, depending on where you are. And this is the Politiama, Liberta Bassa area. So like the really nice part of Palermo, as you can see. Okay, let's look at rental properties in Ziza. So you can see the prices are a little less. €600, I would say, tends to be the average rental price for properties in the Ziza area. You can get some crazy exceptions, as you can see here, but this is a penthouse, so, we'll forgive it. But generally speaking, yes, around €600 is the average rental cost, I would say, for this neighbourhood. And the more expensive properties tend to be either a lot bigger or tend to be in better condition as well. So you can see just outside of the main centre tends to work better for your money, whether you're renting or buying. And this is Palermo as an example. So you can see it's this. It also depends on where in Italy you are. This is a very, very multifaceted topic because more northern parts of Italy tend to be even more expensive. Now, I did some research. If you see me looking, I'm looking at my computer here because I went onto Perplexity and I asked what the average rents were in Milan city in the centre versus the suburbs. And we've got a little grid that's come up here detailing it. So to give you an example, literally from north to south, there are lots of other towns, cities, regions in between, but just to give you a real life example, Milan, for a one-bedroom apartment in the centre, averages anywhere from €1,200 a month up to €1,800 per month. If you want to get an even bigger property, three-bedroom apartments apparently average between €2,500 up to €4,000 per month. If you go to live in the suburbs of Milan, which I know a lot of people do, obviously, for this reason, a one-bedroom home can average anywhere between €900 a month up to €1,200 a month. And subsequently, an even bigger property, three-bedroom home, could average between €1,500 up to €2,000 a month. So you can see Milan is definitely a lot more expensive as a city. And even I would say other parts of northern Italy can be quite expensive. Tuscany, people are telling me that Tuscany is proving to be quite an expensive place to live as well. So you've got to consider this. Location really is everything, not even just where you are within a city, but also where you are within Italy. Now, I will say to you that I used to say that the southern parts of Italy were cheaper. However, now I'm saying it always depends, because if you've been a follower of my channel for some time, you'll know that when we were looking for properties back here in the Salerno province, we were outpriced from the city centre, because I lived in Salerno city centre for 4 years before I moved to Palermo. And at that point, the rents were always considered to be more expensive, but they were not wildly so. Now, the rental prices, especially in the city centre, are ridiculous. Like, you could easily pay over €1,000 a month for an apartment. And for me personally, I couldn't justify that, knowing that just a few years prior, I had paid a lot less. So it does depend on where you are, even within the south of Italy. So this is definitely something to consider. Really get clear on your non-negotiables. Where do you need to base yourself to live a comfortable life? what part of Italy really suits you. This is why you need to come here and really spend time in this country and not just learn about it through a screen. I'm real, like the sensation of living here and spending time in this country is very different to what any content creator could portray through a screen to you. But you need to just spend a bit of time in different parts of Italy to understand where feels more like home for you. And then you need to decide what your non-negotiables are in terms of transport links, in terms of connections, in terms of the quality of life that you want to live, to decide then what location could be best. And from there, you need to whittle it down. So it's kind of like you're reverse engineering the process to arrive at the point where you find somewhere that suits your budget in a better way. Now, let's move into the second camp within this category. And it really is like local services and amenities. Now, I will say about this, again, it depends on where you are. If you live or you plan to live in a tourist location, your services and amenities might fluctuate during the course of a year. Now, it's not to say that people don't live by the sea, for example. However, what you have to consider is that a large percentage of the businesses that operate in these areas tend to only operate during high season. So we're talking spring and summer months. When it comes to the late autumn and winter, those businesses tend to close. And so that can impact not only how a place feels in low season, but also your availability of services to be able to buy things from. Now, what I mean by that is, if you don't drive, if you don't have a large supermarket on your doorstep and you rely on kind of the shops and services that you have around you, if some of those businesses close, that's going to impact your quality of life, but also your budget, because then you're going to have to find a way to get to the larger supermarkets. Now, I will say to you as well, on that note, if you live in the middle of nowhere or you live in a smaller town or village, and again, it's not very easy for you to make your way to the bigger supermarkets, you will soon become dependent on the local shops and services where you live. Now, whilst I'm a big advocate for supporting local businesses, absolutely, and I love the fact that this concept exists here in Italy and is such an integral part of life here, I will say to you, those small independent supermarkets are not usually the cheapest of places. And so that is what you depend on every single week to get your food shop from. You're going to be paying a lot more than if you were able to go to one of the larger out-of-town supermarkets, for example. So you must consider this. Shops and amenities are going to play a big part of your everyday life. And so you need to have a variety of shops to choose from. You don't just want to be relying solely on the small independently run ones, because yes, the variety is not necessarily going to be there, but also the cost is generally going to be higher as well. Now, if you position yourself, coming back to location again, in the middle of a city centre, you've got everything around you, but of course that comes at a price. So you've just got to find that balance. A lot of neighbourhoods do have good shops and amenities, and that's the balance you want to strike, without necessarily paying through the nose to live in slap bang in the middle of a centre, but being able to live in a neighbourhood that's well serviced with different shops and amenities can make a really big difference to the quality of your life and to your budget. Transport links as well is something else that you need to consider. If you position yourself in a place with excellent transport links, generally the cost of things is going to be higher, of course. Whereas if you live a little bit more in a rural location or in a place that isn't serviced as well, generally speaking, that is reflected in the cost of the homes too. So there are so many factors that you need to take into consideration, which is why this question is so nuanced and why I needed to record this video, just to give you some food for thought. But you've really and truly, in my opinion, got to come and spend some time in this country if you plan to live here. It's not enough just to do online research. You've got to feel Italy really yourself and get an inner feeling as to where is best for you and what works best for you in terms of budget, and also the cost of things. Because, you know, taking it back to those tourist locations, generally speaking, the locals know where to go. The people that live there, they have the little places that they frequent. But a lot of places are going to be charging like tourist prices for coffees, for lunches. Sometimes you understand with a little bit of experience that if the owners of these bars and restaurants understand that you're local to that area, sometimes they charge you a little less compared to what the tourists pay. This happens, whether that is good or bad, of course, it's questionable, but essentially that's not a given. So this is why it's so important to consider everything that I've spoken about in today's video. And if this is something that you're in the middle of thinking about at the moment, this video as well, what no one tells you about where to live in Italy, is also going to be of help to you too. I will see you in the next video.